it kind of hits you sometimes, doesn't it? Just how much of what we do, like scrolling through news feeds or even, the really huge scientific breakthroughs, it's all empowered by this basic human need to just figure things out.
Yeah.
It feels like more than just wanting answers. It's like this engine, curiosity driving us.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to take a really close look at, well, the nature of human curiosity and exploration.
Okay.
And we've got a fascinating bunch of ideas here from psychology, anthropology, philosophy, even artificial intelligence, all trying to get a handle on this fundamental human thing.
Which, if you're listening to this, you probably get it. You're interested in gaining knowledge, connecting the dots. That's curiosity right there in action. So our goal today is to really dig deep into what makes curiosity tick. We want to explore where it comes from, how it evolves, the kind of impact it has on our lives, on society, and even how AI is starting to play into this whole dynamic. We'll be pulling out the most, insightful bits from these different areas to give you a clear and hopefully thought-provoking picture.
Yeah, and just to give you a quick map of where we're going, we'll look at psychological models, how curiosity works in our heads, basically.
Okay.
We'll touch on anthropological insights, how different cultures might approach exploration, philosophical takes on that basic desire to know, and the really cutting-edge stuff in AI that's trying to, well, build curious machines.
Okay, let's get into it then.
Yeah.
When we talk about curiosity and exploration, what exactly are we talking about? It feels like something we all kind of get instinctively, but maybe it's harder to pin down.
You've definitely nailed a key point there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems straightforward, but curiosity is actually pretty complex. At its core, it's that impulse, right, that pushes us to seek out new stuff, ask questions, strive to understand, and importantly, to venture into the unknown.
Okay.
And you can think of exploration as sort of the outward actions we take because of that inner curiosity.
Gotcha. So what do the psychologists tell us? What's driving it from their perspective?
Well, psychology offers a few different ways to slice it. First, they often distinguish between state curiosity, that fleeting feeling when something just grabs your attention.
Right.
And trait curiosity, which is more about how generally curious a person tends to be. Like a sudden interest in a weird noise outside is state curiosity. But someone who's always reading, always asking questions, they probably have high trait curiosity.
Okay.
Then you've got different theories about what actually sparks it. The information gap theory suggests it's the discomfort, that feeling of realizing you don't know something, that motivates you.
Ah, okay. Like that little mental itch you get when you can't quite place a song title or something.
Exactly, that feeling. But then other ideas focus more on the positive side, the pleasure, the reward we get from learning something new. These often get bundled into what are called interest deprivation models or ID models. They suggest curiosity can be driven by both wanting to fill that gap, the deprivation part, and looking forward to that good feeling of discovery, the interest part.
Right, a push and a pull.
Kind of, yeah. And psychologists also break down curiosity into different types. There's epistemic curiosity, that's the real hunger for knowledge, for understanding.
Okay.
Perceptual curiosity is more about seeking new sights, sounds, tastes, new sensory experiences. And interpersonal curiosity is our interest in other people, what they're thinking, feeling, doing.
That breakdown really makes a lot of sense. So from psychology, it's this mix of motivations, different kinds of wanting to know. What about anthropology? How do they look at curiosity and exploration?
Well, for anthropology, curiosity and exploration are pretty fundamental to the whole field, really. Anthropology kind of grew out of this intense curiosity about the sheer variety of human cultures and ways of life. Anthropologists often immerse themselves, live within different communities to explore and understand cultural dynamics from the inside out. Historically speaking, the field's origins are definitely tied to the age of exploration. When European explorers encountered societies that were previously unknown to them, it sparked this, more organized effort to understand what it means to be human in all these different contexts.
So exploration for them is both literal, like going places.
Yeah, physically going out into the world, but also intellectually trying to understand human origins, social structures, beliefs, all of it.
Okay. And philosophy, the original deep thinkers, what's their angle on this?
Oh, philosophers have been chewing on this for millennia. Thinkers way back, like Aristotle and Plato, they saw the desire to know, that sense of wonder, as the very starting point of philosophy itself.
Foundation.
Exactly. William James, much later, called it the impulse towards better cognition. And if you look at it from, say, the philosophy of information perspective, exploration can be seen as a way we try to reduce uncertainty about the world around us.
Ah.
There's even philosophical thinking about our curiosity about the past, how it connects to memory and our sense of time.
So it seems like we've got these different lenses: psychology on the individual mind, anthropology on culture, philosophy on the maybe fundamental drive. Is there a common thread sort of running through all of them?
Yeah, what's really fascinating, and it pops up across these fields, is this ongoing question. Is curiosity mainly driven by a negative feeling, that sense of lacking something, not knowing?
Right, the gap.
Or is it driven by a positive one, the joy, the satisfaction we get from discovery?
Or both.
It's almost certainly a bit of both, yeah. That feeling of a gap might trigger a really focused search for a specific answer, like, what's that word? Whereas a more general sense of interest might fuel broader, more sustained exploration, like getting really into a new hobby or topic. Making that distinction is actually pretty important for understanding how curiosity works in different situations and for different people.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've established it's this multifaceted drive. Now, you mentioned the AI perspective earlier. How does artificial intelligence even begin to approach something that feels so human, like curiosity?
That's a great question, and it's a really active area. In the world of AI, especially in reinforcement learning, that's how AI learns to make decisions in complex situations.
Right.
Curiosity and exploration are being looked at as really clever strategies for any intelligent system, whether it's biological or artificial, to process information and adapt effectively, especially when the environment is complex or changing.
So they're not just studying us, they're trying to build it.
Exactly. AI researchers aren't just trying to understand human curiosity. They're actively trying to build AI systems that have similar internal drives to learn and explore, particularly when there aren't obvious external rewards to guide them.
Okay, so how? How do they do that? How do you program curiosity?
Well, one key idea revolves around information itself. Drawing from information theory, you can actually mathematically link curiosity to reducing uncertainty.
Oh, so?
Think about it. The more surprising or unexpected something is, the more new information it potentially contains, right?
Okay, yeah.
So in AI, the drive to explore can be framed as the AI trying to maximize the amount of new information it gets, which in turn reduces its uncertainty about its world or its task.
Ah, I see.
And this leads directly to the concept of intrinsic motivation, or IM, in AI, instead of just learning from external rewards like points in a game. An AI agent can generate its own internal reward signals based on things like novelty, how new is this experience, or prediction error, how wrong was my prediction about what would happen, or learning progress, how quickly am I improving at this, or even competence, how good am I getting?
Wow. That's almost like the AI is patting itself on the back for learning something new.
Precisely. That's a good way to put it. And AI systems also have to grapple with different kinds of uncertainty. They try to distinguish between epistemic uncertainty, basically, I don't know but could find out.
Like the information gap again?
Exactly. And aleatoric uncertainty, that's the inherent randomness in the world that you can't really reduce just by getting more data. A lot of AI exploration methods are specifically designed to tackle that epistemic uncertainty, actively seeking out experiences that promise the most information gain.
It's really fascinating how these different fields seem to be converging. Psychology's information gaps, philosophy's desire to know, anthropology's focus on exploration, and now AI trying to quantify uncertainty reduction. It all seems to point to this really fundamental principle of intelligent agents needing to seek information.
That's exactly right. It feels like we're tapping into something very basic about intelligence itself. And this isn't just some, modern Western idea or anything. The evidence really suggests that curiosity and exploration are fundamental aspects of the human condition. You see it across demographics, across cultures, throughout history.
How can we be so sure it's that universal? What's the evidence?
Well, just look at the sheer amount of time and resources we humans pour into activities that aren't directly tied to immediate survival. Think about reading novels, watching documentaries, creating art, having deep conversations about abstract ideas.
Yeah, none of that puts food on the table immediately.
Right, but we do it constantly. These are all driven fundamentally by this natural desire to learn, to experience new things, to understand, even if there's no obvious practical payoff right away. It really underscores how deeply ingrained this drive is. It's part of what makes us human.
Okay, so we've got that curiosity is this fundamental, complex, universal drive. Where does it actually come from? What are the biological roots of this?
Well, it's definitely deeply connected to our biology, especially our brain chemistry. The brain's reward system is key here, and particularly a neurotransmitter called dopamine.
Ah, dopamine. Hear a lot about that.
Yeah, and it's often simplified as just the pleasure chemical,
Right.
but it's much more than that. Dopamine is crucial for motivation, for learning, and specifically for that drive to seek out and explore novel things.
Okay.
When we encounter something new or something that hints at a potential reward, and that reward can absolutely be new information, dopamine gets released in certain brain circuits, that feels good, and it reinforces the behavior, encouraging us to keep exploring, keep learning.
Yeah. So that aha moment when you figure something out, that's literally a little dopamine rush rewarding the effort.
In a simplified way, yeah, that's part of it. And several brain regions are involved in this whole dance. You've got key reward centers like the nucleus accumbens, areas involved in emotion like the amygdala, the hippocampus, which is vital for memory formation, and the prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain that handles attention, planning, and higher level thinking.
Oh, a whole network.
Exactly. These areas all work together when we're feeling curious, not just anticipating a reward, but also when we're resolving that mental puzzle, when we encounter something unexpected, when we're encoding that new information, and when we're focusing our attention.
And is it partly genetic, or some people just sort of wired to be more curious than others?
There's definitely evidence suggesting a genetic component, yes. Variations in genes related to how the dopamine system functions have been linked to personality traits like openness to experience and novelty seeking, which are closely related to curiosity. So for instance, different versions or alleles of certain dopamine receptor genes or genes involved in dopamine transporter breakdown can influence dopamine levels or how effectively dopamine signals work in the brain.
So my genes might predispose me to being more or less curious.
They might contribute to a predisposition, yeah. But, and this is really crucial, our genes are absolutely not the whole story, not even close. Our environment plays a massive role too.
Nature and nurture.
Always. Things like our early experiences, our upbringing, the opportunities we have, our social interactions, all of these can significantly affect how those genes are expressed, that's epigenetics, and ultimately shape how curious we actually become and how we express that curiosity. So yeah, there might be a biological nudge, but our life experiences really molded it.
That makes total sense. It's always that complex interplay, isn't it? You also mentioned something earlier, embodied cognition. How does that fit in?
Right, embodied cognition. This is the idea that our thinking, including our curiosity, isn't just some abstract process happening solely inside our skulls. It's deeply grounded in our physical body and our interactions with the physical world. Exploration, by its very nature, is physical, right? We move around, we touch things, we look, we listen, we use our senses to gather information. Embodied cognition suggests that these sensory and motor experiences aren't just inputs for thinking. They actually shape how we think and form concepts, how we physically explore our environment directly influences how we mentally understand it.
So the way a baby explores by putting everything in its mouth is actually building its understanding of the world.
Exactly. That physical interaction is part of the cognitive process.
Fascinating. So shifting gears a bit, from an evolutionary standpoint, why did this drive to be curious and explore even develop? What was the survival advantage?
Well, from an evolutionary perspective, curiosity and exploration likely conferred a significant survival advantage on our ancestors. Think about it. Being driven to explore would have helped early humans find new sources of food, water, shelter.
Okay.
Discover better territories, identify potential threats or predators, and also, crucially, understand the social dynamics within their groups. Who's reliable? Who's a rival?
Right. Navigating the social world, too.
Absolutely. Constantly gathering information was vital for learning about the environment, for building those mental maps of their surroundings, which are essential for navigation, planning, and remembering where resources are. So you can really see curiosity as this fundamental drive for information, almost as critical for long-term survival in a complex, changing world as the basic drives for, say, hunger or thirst.
It's like our ancestors were constantly running software updates on their world knowledge just to stay alive.
That's a great analogy.
Huh.
And a key challenge that comes bundled with this is what biologists and economists call the explore-exploit trade-off.
Explore-exploit.
Yeah. At any given moment, an organism or even an AI has to make a decision. Should I stick with what I already know works, Exploit the known, reliable food source, the familiar strategy, even if it's maybe not the absolute best?
Okay.
Or should I go out and explore new, uncertain options that might be better but might also be worse, or waste time and energy?
The dilemma. Stick with the safe bet or gamble on something new.
Exactly. If you only exploit, you might get stuck with something suboptimal when better options appear. If you only explore, you waste resources and might never benefit from your discoveries. Successfully balancing these two, knowing when to stick and when to switch, is absolutely crucial for adapting and thriving, especially when the environment changes.
It sounds like a constant, almost subconscious calculation we're always making.
It probably is, to some extent. And it's such a fundamental problem in decision-making under uncertainty that, as I mentioned, AI researchers spend a lot of time developing algorithms like epsilon-greedy strategies or upper confidence-bound methods, specifically to try and find the optimal balance between exploring for new information and exploiting current knowledge to maximize rewards.
Huh.
Some researchers even think that behaviors like play, especially in young animals and humans.
Right. Play seems kind of frivolous sometimes.
It can seem that way, but play often involves a lot of exploration, trying new things, testing boundaries in a relatively safe context. Some theories suggest play might have evolved by sort of co-opting the same neural mechanisms that underlie curiosity. Both involve interacting with novelty and help us learn about the world and develop new skills.
That's interesting. Play is practice for real exploration. So, this drive to explore and learn, it obviously doesn't stay static throughout our lives, does it? How does curiosity change as we age?
No, definitely not static. Curiosity is dynamic. It really evolves across the lifespan. In infancy, it's this incredibly powerful, innate drive. Babies are just naturally drawn to novelty, exploring everything through their senses.
Yeah, absolutely.
This early, raw curiosity is what fuels their fundamental learning about objects, people, cause and effect, the basic building blocks of understanding their world.
Okay.
Then moving into adolescence, curiosity takes on this really critical role in identity formation. As teenagers start figuring out who they are, what they believe, where they fit in, they explore different values, interests, relationships, potential future paths. Erik Erikson, a key developmental psychologist, talked about this stage being crucial for developing a sense of fidelity, being true to oneself, and curiosity about oneself, and the world is really what drives that whole process of self-discovery.
That whole trying on different hats phase.
Exactly. Now, when we look at adulthood and into older age, the picture gets a bit more nuanced. The research findings are somewhat mixed, partly because it depends on whether you're measuring trait curiosity, that general tendency, or state curiosity, that momentary feeling.
Right, the difference we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Some studies suggest that trait curiosity, especially the part related to seeking out novelty and cognitive stimulation, might show a gradual decline on average as people get older.
Why would that be?
Well, one prominent theory, socio-emotional selectivity theory, suggests that as people perceive their remaining time as more limited, their goals shift. They tend to prioritize emotional well-being, meaningful relationships, and optimizing positive experiences, perhaps over constantly seeking new information or challenges.
That makes intuitive sense.
Yeah.
Maybe less time for the completely unknown, more focus on what feels deeply valuable.
Precisely. However, other research complicates this a bit. Some longitudinal studies suggest that trait curiosity might actually remain relatively stable through much of adulthood, or even increase during certain phases before potentially declining in very late life. It's not a simple downward slope.
Okay.
And interestingly, state curiosity, our ability to become curious about specific things in the moment, might actually remain quite stable or even increase with age. Older adults often have richer, more complex networks of existing knowledge. So when they encounter new information that connects to what they already know, it can trigger a really strong, specific curiosity to fill in the gaps, make new connections, or resolve inconsistencies.
So more knowledge might actually mean more potential gaps to be curious about.
Exactly. And importantly, maintaining curiosity in later life, staying engaged, continuing to learn, has been consistently linked to a host of positive outcomes. Better cognitive function, greater psychological well-being, a stronger sense of purpose, and even increased longevity. It really highlights how flexible and context-dependent curiosity can be across the lifespan.
It's really fascinating how this drive, which feels so innate, has also been viewed so differently throughout history. How have societies actually thought about curiosity over the centuries?
That's a really crucial point. While the underlying drive might be ancient, the way human societies have understood, valued, or even condemned curiosity has changed dramatically over time. If you go way back, early philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, as we mentioned, saw wonder and that desire to know as the very foundation of philosophical inquiry. A virtue, essentially.
Okay, the starting point.
But then, if you look at, say, early medieval Europe, curiositas was often viewed with considerable suspicion. It was sometimes seen as a vice linked to being overly inquisitive, maybe meddling, or worse, potentially leading people away from religious devotion and towards forbidden or dangerous knowledge.
Wow, almost the opposite of how we often frame it today as this great engine of progress.
Exactly, a real flip. But then you get the Renaissance, and perhaps even more profoundly, the scientific revolution starting around the 16th century. During this period, there was a major reevaluation. Curiosity started to be seen less as a vice and more as a crucial, valuable driving force for investigation, observation, and discovery.
What prompted that shift?
Well, it happened alongside the development of new scientific instruments, think telescopes, microscopes, which literally opened up new worlds to be curious about, and new ways of communicating findings, like printing presses, helped spread ideas and fuel further inquiry. Curiosity became tightly linked with observing the natural world and systematically trying to understand it. This was also, of course, the age of exploration, where European voyages, driven partly by curiosity, but also very much by economic ambitions and political power.
Yeah, not just pure curiosity.
Definitely not. But those encounters, however fraught, did expose Europeans to vastly different cultures and environments, fueling further inquiry, albeit often through a very biased lens.
So it's kind of a mixed, complex historical picture.
Absolutely. And some historians have even debated whether a perceived curiosity deficit in other major civilizations at the time might have played a role in why the scientific revolution took root where and when it did, though that's a really complex and contested argument.
Okay.
Then, moving forward into the Enlightenment, the 18th century, there was this huge embrace of curiosity and reason, not just for understanding nature, but as powerful tools for examining society, politics, and human institutions. Thinkers started using critical inquiry to question traditional authority, divine right, established dogmas.
Leading to big changes.
Huge changes. This intellectual curiosity directly inspired revolutionary movements in America and France, calls for social reform, and the development of modern democratic ideas. And since then, by and large, curiosity has maintained this generally positive image in Western culture, often lauded as the engine of progress, innovation, and individual fulfillment. But this historical view really hammers home that the social meaning and value placed on curiosity isn't fixed. It's constantly negotiated and depends heavily on the cultural context, the dominant values, and the power structures of the time.
That's incredible. Just thinking about how this thing inside us has been praised and condemned at different times. So, okay, we know curiosity has these deep roots, this complex history. But what are the actual tangible impacts on us as individuals and on society?
Oh, the impacts are incredibly wide-ranging. Let's start at the individual level. Curiosity is a massive booster for cognition and learning. There's solid neuroscientific evidence showing that when our curiosity is piqued, our brains are actually in a state that's more receptive to learning and better at consolidating memories.
How does that work?
Well, it seems related to that dopamine release we talked about. When you're curious about something, activity increases not just in reward circuits, but also in the hippocampus, which is critical for forming long-term memories. The dopamine might act like a save button, helping to strengthen the connections related to what you're learning.
Interesting.
So when you're curious, you're not just more motivated to seek information. You also tend to pay closer attention, process the information more deeply, and remember it better later on. It's a fundamental driver of cognitive development from infancy onwards.
So being curious isn't just like a nice to have, it actually makes our brains work better for learning.
Exactly. It optimizes the learning process. And the benefits go well beyond just cognition. Curiosity is strongly linked to our overall psychological well-being.
How so?
Numerous studies show that people who score higher on measures of trait curiosity tend to report greater life satisfaction, more frequent positive emotions, a stronger sense of meaning and purpose in life, higher levels of happiness, and even greater resilience or grit when facing challenges. Conversely, lower levels of curiosity have been associated with things like depression and anxiety. It suggests that maintaining an open, engaged, inquisitive approach to life really contributes significantly to our mental health.
And is that something we can change? Can we become more curious?
Yes, absolutely. That's the encouraging part. While there's a trait component, curiosity isn't seen as completely fixed. It's considered a state that can be cultivated. We can consciously practice being more curious by asking more questions, especially why and how, by actively trying to take different perspectives, by seeking out novel experiences, even small ones. It's like a muscle that can be strengthened.
That's really good to know. So actively working on being more curious could actually give our well-being a tangible boost.
It certainly seems that way based on the research, though it's worth a small caveat. Sometimes that intense deprivation-type curiosity, really needing to know a specific answer now, might involve some temporary discomfort or frustration until the gap is filled.
Right, that itchy feeling again.
Yeah, but overall, the general pattern points to a very strong positive link between curiosity and feeling good. And one more thing on the individual level. Curiosity influences our decisions. Sometimes, the value we place on simply getting information can be so strong that it motivates us to choose options that might not offer the best immediate tangible reward, but promise to resolve uncertainty or provide knowledge. It shows information itself can have this intrinsic value that drives our choices.
Okay, so beyond the individual brain and well-being, how does curiosity shape our sort of personal growth, our search for meaning in the bigger picture?
Well, linking back to development, we touched on how crucial that adolescent exploration is for forging an identity. Curiosity about who we are, what we value, how we connect with others, that really drives the whole process of figuring out our place in the world. And that journey of self-discovery, fueled by curiosity, doesn't just stop in adolescence. It's really an ongoing process throughout life. We continue to learn about ourselves, refine our values, adapt to new roles and challenges. Curiosity helps us build self-knowledge. This aligns really well with ideas from humanistic psychology, think Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, with self-actualization at the top. Curiosity fuels those growth choices that lead towards fulfilling our potential.
So curiosity is kind of the engine for climbing that pyramid.
You could definitely see it that way. Philosophically, too, you can view life itself as an ongoing process of discovery, an unfolding narrative that we explore through our experiences. And when it comes to the big existential questions, the search for meaning curiosity plays a vital role. Think Viktor Frankl's will to meaning. Curiosity drives us to explore possibilities, to discover our own inner resources, to find meaning through creative work, significant encounters, or even our attitude towards unavoidable suffering. It's about being curious about what life still holds, even in difficult circumstances. It fuels engagement with the world, even in the face of what some existentialists might see as an inherently meaningless universe.
Like curiosity is the spark that keeps us engaged in that personal journey of understanding ourselves and finding our place, finding meaning. Now, zooming out again, the really big picture, how has curiosity shaped society, shaped progress?
On that collective level, you could argue that curiosity is the single most important driver of human progress across virtually every domain. Science, technology, art, culture, you name it.
That's a big claim.
It is, but think about it. Science, at its absolute core, is fueled by asking why and how. Every major scientific revolution, every breakthrough, think Newton asking about gravity, Darwin about evolution, Marie Curie about radioactivity, Einstein about relativity. It all starts with intense curiosity driving systematic investigation.
Right.
And crucially, this often involves basic research exploring fundamental questions just out of sheer curiosity without any immediate practical application in mind. Yet, time and again, that blue sky research leads to the most transformative discoveries down the line.
That's such a good point, the unforeseen benefits of just wanting to know.
Exactly. And it's the same pattern in mathematics. Mathematical progress is driven by curiosity about abstract patterns, structures, relationships. From ancient geometry and the concept of zero to calculus, topology, modern algorithms, mathematicians explore this realm of logical possibility, often driven purely by intellectual interest. And yet, these abstract explorations provide the indispensable language and conceptual tools that underpin virtually all of science and technology.
The framework.
Precisely. Technological innovation, too, very often springs from curiosity, exploring possibilities, tinkering, trying to solve problems in new ways. Think Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, filled with curious designs, or the innovations in shipbuilding during the Age of Discovery, driven by the need to explore further, or even the invention of the internet, partly born from a desire to connect researchers.
And art.
Art, absolutely. Curiosity drives artists to explore new materials, new forms of expression, new ways of seeing and interpreting the world. Think again of Da Vinci. His intense anatomical curiosity directly informed the realism of his paintings.
Ah, interesting connection.
And culturally, curiosity fuels exchange, diffusion of ideas, and social change. We talked about the age of exploration. Despite all its massive downsides and complexities, it did facilitate unprecedented global exchange, however unequal. And the intellectual curiosity of the Enlightenment, questioning authority and tradition, directly inspired revolutions and reforms that reshaped societies.
So it really is this constant questioning, exploring, tinkering that propels us forward collectively.
It seems to be a primary engine. And it's not just about accumulating knowledge, but about developing the very tools of understanding the scientific method, mathematical systems, logical frameworks that allow us to make sense of the world and increasingly to shape it.
So curiosity isn't just about finding the answers. It's about building the capacity to ask better questions and develop better ways of knowing in the first place.
Exactly. It pushes us beyond just collecting facts towards understanding the underlying principles, the how and the why.
Okay, this paints a really compelling, mostly positive picture of curiosity's power. But let's be balanced. Are there downsides, ethical complexities, times when curiosity goes wrong?
Absolutely. It's not all positive, and the ethics can get very tricky. For one, exploration inherently involves risk. That could be physical risk, exploring dangerous environments, testing limits, or psychological risk, uncovering disturbing truths about ourselves or the world that might be difficult to cope with. Curiosity can also lead to harmful behaviors. Think about morbid curiosity or curiosity driving things like substance abuse experimentation or reckless thrill-seeking.
Okay.
And historically, as we touched upon, curiosity-driven exploration has been deeply entangled with exploitation and harm. The age of discovery, while fueled partly by curiosity, was also inextricably linked to colonialism, violence, the slave trade, and the destruction of indigenous cultures. The power imbalances were enormous, and curiosity was often used to justify domination. Post-colonial critiques rightly challenge those Eurocentric narratives of discovery.
That's a vital point. Curiosity in the context of power can be dangerous.
Extremely. And even today, we face ethical dilemmas related to curiosity. Think about scientific research, the need for ethical guidelines for human subjects, like the Belmont Report principles, respect for persons, beneficence, justice, and animal research reflects the potential for curiosity to cause harm if unchecked. Or consider corporate curiosity about consumer behavior leading to invasive data collection and privacy violations, or the environmental costs of certain kinds of exploration and resource extraction. Curiosity can also be subversive, which can be positive in challenging outdated norms, but can also be destabilizing or threatening to established beliefs and power structures.
So it's a powerful force that needs direction, needs ethical guardrails. What about the absence of curiosity? Can that be problematic too?
Definitely. A lack of curiosity, often manifesting as apathy or indifference, can be a significant barrier to pro-social behavior. Think about the bystander effect. People are less likely to help someone in distress if others are present, partly due perhaps to a diffusion of responsibility, but maybe also a lack of curious engagement with the other person's situation.
Interesting link.
A more extreme failure related to lack of curiosity is dehumanization, viewing others as less than human. This can take blatant forms, like comparing groups to animals, or more subtle forms. When we dehumanize others, we essentially shut down our curiosity about their experiences, their thoughts, their feelings. This removes them from our sphere of moral concern, making it easier to mistreat them or tolerate their suffering.
So lack of curiosity enables cruelty.
It can certainly be a major enabling factor. If you're not curious about someone's inner world, it's easier to objectify them or harm them. However, the relationship between dehumanization and violence is complex. Some research suggests dehumanization is more linked to instrumental violence, harming someone to achieve a goal. Other forms of violence, sometimes called moral violence, might actually require seeing the victim as fully human but as deserving punishment, which involves a different, though perhaps equally dangerous kind of certainty rather than curiosity.
Okay, that's a sobering nuance.
Yeah. And group dynamics can also suppress curiosity and lead to negative outcomes. Think about groupthink, where the desire for harmony overrides critical thinking and curiosity about alternatives. Or group polarization, where groups make more extreme decisions than individuals would. Or de-individuation, where being in a crowd reduces self-awareness and accountability, potentially leading to impulsive or harmful behavior. In many of these cases, a lack of individual curiosity and critical inquiry, combined with group pressure, contributes to bad decisions or actions. So yes, cruelty and harmful actions often stem from a failure of curiosity and empathy, sometimes enabled by dehumanization or group dynamics, though the picture with morally motivated violence is more complex. Apathy is certainly a related failure.
It seems like we need frameworks, then, for exploring responsibly. What do those look like across different fields?
Well, different fields have developed their own approaches. In science, as mentioned, we have ethics committees and principles like the Belmont Report guiding research.
Yeah.
Anthropology has developed rigorous ethical guidelines, emphasizing informed consent, avoiding harm, protecting anonymity, and increasingly collaboration with and giving back to the communities being studied. Post-colonial theory also pushes anthropologists to be constantly curious about their own biases and the power dynamics involved.
Okay.
Philosophy helps us think about the intrinsic versus instrumental value of knowledge gained through curiosity and wrestle with balancing individual freedoms to explore with the need for collective well-being and avoiding harm.
Makes sense.
In technology and AI, there's a growing movement to develop ethical frameworks. Think about principles like fairness, accountability, transparency, privacy, security, and the need for human oversight, all aimed at guiding the curiosity and capabilities of AI systems responsibly.
Yeah.
And in education, frameworks like Casel's social-emotional learning competencies explicitly include responsible decision-making, which involves being curious about consequences and considering ethical standards. It's about fostering curiosity alongside empathy and ethical reasoning.
So it's about cultivating not just curiosity, but responsible curiosity. Now, this might be a bit philosophical, but how does our curiosity relate to ideas about free will, destiny, or human agency? Does being curious mean we're shaping our own path?
That's a deep question. It touches on the age-old free will versus determinism debate. If the universe operates according to fixed physical laws, physical determinism, does that leave room for genuine free will? It's a huge philosophical puzzle.
Yeah, no easy answer there.
No. But many philosophers adopt a compatibilist view. They argue that free will, in the sense of being able to act according to our conscious intentions and reasons without undue coercion, can coexist with determinism. Free will operates at an agential level, even if our atoms are following deterministic laws.
Okay, so how does curiosity fit into that agential level?
Well, curiosity and exploration seem like prime examples of human agency in action. We consciously direct our attention towards things that pique our interest. We formulate goals based on what we want to find out. We make choices about which paths to explore. This intentional, goal-directed seeking of information feels very much like an expression of our agency, our ability to shape our experiences and understanding.
So curiosity drives us to make choices that define our path.
It certainly seems that way. Of course, people who strongly believe in destiny or fate might interpret their curiosity-driven discoveries as confirmation of a predetermined path. Confirmation bias can play a role there.
Right. And what about AI? Does AI have agency or curiosity in the same way?
Not in the human sense. Current AI systems, even curious ones, operate based on programmed algorithms and data. They are deterministic systems. They don't have consciousness, beliefs, subjective experiences, or genuine agency in the way we understand it for humans. They can model complex systems, maybe even simulate exploration, but they aren't making choices based on conscious awareness or personal values. Interestingly, AI might inadvertently limit our exploration if things like recommendation algorithms create filter bubbles that shield us from novelty. So AI is a fascinating tool for reflecting on these questions of agency and choice, but it doesn't really resolve the fundamental philosophical debates. It highlights that our agency, however we define it, always operates within constraints, biological, environmental, and now increasingly technological.
Okay, that's a lot to think about regarding the complexities. Let's shift back to something more practical. How can we actively nurture curiosity, especially in education systems and throughout our lives?
Yeah, this is so important because, as we've seen, while curiosity might be innate, it definitely needs the right conditions to flourish and can easily be dampened. The educational philosopher John Dewey was a big proponent of this. He argued that education should really start with the learner's natural interest and curiosity.
So how do parents and educators actually do that?
Well, it starts with creating a psychologically safe environment where kids feel comfortable asking questions, even seemingly silly ones, without fear of judgment. It means actively encouraging questions, valuing the process of inquiry as much as the right answer. Providing opportunities for exploration is key. Things like unstructured free play, especially with loose parts, simple materials that can be used in many ways, allows children to follow their own interests.
Mhm.
Using rich, stimulating materials and experiences that spark wonder also helps.
It sounds like less about pouring information in and more about creating an environment that pulls curiosity out.
Exactly. And there are specific educational approaches designed around this. Inquiry-based learning, IBL, is a great example. It flips the traditional model. Instead of the teacher presenting facts, students are guided to investigate meaningful questions. They formulate their own questions, gather and analyze data or information, and develop their own explanations and conclusions.
So they're active participants in discovery.
Totally. It fosters not just deeper understanding, but also critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and intellectual independence. Project-based learning, PBL, is similar, involving in-depth investigation of a complex question or problem. Building a classroom culture where inquiry, questioning, and even making mistakes are seen as normal parts of learning is vital. There are even specific techniques, like the question formulation technique, QFT, that explicitly teach students how to generate better, more insightful questions.
That sounds great in theory, but you mentioned systemic barriers earlier. What are the big ones in education that tend to stifle curiosity?
Unfortunately, there are several common ones. A heavy overemphasis on standardized testing often forces teaching towards rote memorization of facts needed for the test, rather than deeper conceptual understanding or exploration.
Teaching to the test.
Exactly. Rigid, standardized curricula can also be a problem, leaving little room for teachers or students to pursue topics of genuine interest or making subjects feel disconnected from each other and from students' lives. A classroom culture focused solely on getting the right answers and avoiding failure can discourage intellectual risk-taking, creative thinking, and exploring alternative possibilities. And a lack of student autonomy, not having choices in what or how they learn, combined with content that feels irrelevant, can really dampen intrinsic motivation and curiosity. Some critics, like John Taylor Gatto, even argued that the structure of compulsory schooling itself can inadvertently teach conformity and obedience over curiosity and critical thinking.
That's a sobering critique. It really highlights the tension between standardization and fostering genuine curiosity. What about the role of parents in this? How much influence do they have?
Parents have a huge influence, especially in the early years. Research consistently shows that supportive parenting styles tend to foster curiosity. Think authoritative parenting warm, responsive, sets clear boundaries, but also encourages independence and discussion. Providing that secure attachment, that safe base John Bowlby talked about, allows children to feel confident exploring the world. Even how praise is given matters. Praising effort and the process of exploration seems more effective than just praising innate ability.
Okay, supportive and encouraging independence. What about the opposite?
Well, controlling parenting styles tend to inhibit curiosity. This includes authoritarian parenting, strict rules, low warmth, but also what researchers call parental psychological control, PPC. That's things like intruding on a child's thoughts and feelings, inducing guilt, withdrawing love to control behavior. These tactics undermine a child's sense of autonomy and competence, making them less likely to explore confidently. Providing autonomy support, letting children make age-appropriate choices and solve problems themselves, and emotional support is really key for nurturing that exploratory drive.
So it really comes down to balancing guidance with respecting their growing autonomy and letting them explore.
One last piece on education. How does curiosity connect with critical thinking? They seem closely related, but maybe not identical.
They're definitely distinct but deeply intertwined. You can think of curiosity as the motivation, the engine, the desire to know, to explore, to seek information. Critical thinking provides the skills, the tools needed to analyze that information effectively, evaluate evidence, identify biases, question assumptions, and make reasoned judgments.
So curiosity finds the stuff, critical thinking figures out what to do with it.
That's a good way to put it. Curiosity often initiates the process. I wonder about that. While critical thinking helps navigate the complexities, weigh the evidence, and arrive at a well-supported understanding. Effective education needs to foster both. This means encouraging questioning, but also teaching how to analyze sources, justify claims with evidence, consider different perspectives, engage in reasoned debate, use case studies, practice active listening. All those skills.
And educators themselves play a role, a huge role. Educators who model both curiosity, being open to new ideas, admitting when they don't know something, and critical evaluation. Questioning sources, thinking aloud about their reasoning, set a powerful example. It really comes back to creating that classroom culture centered on inquiry, where both asking good questions and thinking carefully about the answers are highly valued.
It really sounds like a positive feedback loop is possible. Curiosity sparks exploration, which requires critical thinking to make sense of, which then often leads to new questions and deeper curiosity.
Precisely. They build on each other synergistically. Both are absolutely essential for meaningful lifelong learning and navigating an increasingly complex world.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The roots, the evolution, the impacts, the ethics, how to cultivate it. Now let's really lean into the future. What role is artificial intelligence playing right now, and what role might it play in the whole realm of human curiosity?
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting and are moving fast. As we touched on, AI is starting to both, in a sense, emulate curiosity and also help us understand it in new ways. In reinforcement learning, that idea of intrinsic motivation, IM, is a big deal.
Right, the AI rewarding itself.
Exactly. Researchers are actively developing and refining different types of IM for AI agents. There's competence-based IM, where the AI is rewarded for improving its skills on tasks. There's novelty-seeking, rewarding encounters with new states or experiences. There's prediction error, rewarding the AI when the outcome is different from what it expected, signaling something new to learn. There's learning progress, rewarding the AI based on how quickly its prediction errors are decreasing. And there's information gain or uncertainty reduction, directly rewarding the AI for taking actions that are expected to yield the most information about its environment.
So different ways for the AI to be internally driven to explore?
Exactly. And building these computational models gives psychologists and neuroscientists really precise, testable hypotheses about the mechanisms that might underlie curiosity in biological brains. It creates this productive back and forth between AI and cognitive science.
Okay, so AI is helping us model curiosity. How can it be a tool to actually augment our own curiosity and creativity?
This is another huge area. AI, particularly generative AI, can be a powerful tool here. Think about idea generation AI models can brainstorm lists, suggest alternative approaches, create novel combinations of ideas in text, images, music, even code or design.
Like a superpowered brainstorming partner.
Kind of, yeah. Tools like AutoDraw helping with sketching, AIVA composing music, ArtBreeder creating unique images. They can provide starting points or variations we might not have considered. This can lead to co-creation, where humans and AI work together, musicians collaborating with AI composers, designers using AI tools, writers using AI for outlining or overcoming writer's block.
Lowering the barrier to entry, too, maybe.
Definitely. AI tools can democratize creative expression to some extent, allowing people without deep technical skills in, say, graphic design or music theory to still explore creative ideas visually or sonically. AI can also act as a personalized inspiration engine, recommending articles, videos, or other content tailored to your specific interests, potentially sparking new avenues of inquiry.
That sounds amazing. Like AI could be this incredible catalyst for exploration. Are there potential pitfalls there too?
Oh, for sure. We need to think critically about the authenticity and originality of AI-generated content. How much does it just recombine existing patterns versus creating something truly novel? There's also the concern about the potential impact on human skills. Will we become overly reliant on AI tools and let our own creative muscles atrophy? And there's a risk that AI-generated work could become derivative, lacking deeper meaning or personal expression. Perhaps the biggest tension is between personalization and serendipity. Well, AI excels at tailoring recommendations based on your past behavior. That can be great for diving deeper into an existing interest. But true curiosity often thrives on unexpected encounters, stumbling upon things completely outside your usual domain. Overly personalized systems might inadvertently create those filter bubbles or echo chambers that shield us from the unfamiliar, the challenging, the truly novel stuff that could spark transformative curiosity.
Right. So using AI as a tool to broaden horizons, not just deepen existing rabbit holes.
Exactly. It requires conscious effort to use AI as a launching pad for our own exploration, rather than letting it dictate the path entirely.
And what about AI in more formal learning contexts? Personalized education, lifelong learning.
Huge potential there. AI can analyze vast amounts of student data performance, preferences, learning styles to create truly personalized learning pathways.
Tailored to each individual.
Right. It can help foster engagement by aligning content with students' interests, providing challenges at just the right level, not too easy, not too hard, and offering adaptive feedback. Think intelligent tutoring systems that can expand concepts in different ways, or chatbots that can answer student questions 24/7. AI can dynamically adjust the complexity of tasks based on how a student is doing. And for lifelong learning beyond formal schooling, AI can recommend relevant training courses, curate resources for skill development, or even facilitate mentorship connections. By making learning more personalized, engaging, and accessible, AI could play a significant role in fostering curiosity throughout life.
The potential seems enormous. You also mentioned well-being earlier. Is AI being used to sort of help us feel good, pursue happiness?
Yes, there's a growing field of AI in mental health and well-being. You see apps and chatbots, names like Wobot, Wysa, Youper, Replica come up that use natural language processing and components of therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to offer support.
How effective are they?
The potential benefits are clear. Accessibility, available anytime, anywhere. Affordability, often cheaper than traditional therapy. Anonymity and scalability. Some studies show modest reductions in symptoms of anxiety or depression for some users. However, it's really important to be realistic. The idea that AI can guarantee constant well-being is probably unrealistic, and maybe even undesirable negative emotions are a normal part of life and serve important functions. There's limited, rigorous scientific validation for many apps, and there's a risk they could hinder the development of natural coping mechanisms if over-relied upon. AI tools are best seen as potential supplements or entry points to care, not replacements for human connection or professional help, and certainly not a magic bullet for happiness.
Okay, good perspective. What about the really big questions, life, death, existence?
Yep.
Can AI help us understand those? Can AI have logic?
Well, AI certainly excels at formal logic and processing vast amounts of information. It can analyze philosophical texts, religious scriptures, identify patterns, simulate scenarios based on logical rules.
So it can process the data.
It can process the data incredibly well. But, and this is a huge but, it lacks genuine understanding, consciousness, emotions, and lived experience. These are arguably essential for grappling with concepts like life, death, meaning, and existence in a truly human way. Existential meaning seems to arise from subjective human consciousness, values, relationships, finitude, things AI doesn't possess.
So it can't feel the weight of those questions.
Exactly. While people speculate about future concepts like AI, cloud consciousness, or mind uploading, these remain highly speculative and raise more philosophical questions than they answer. AI can be a sophisticated tool, an assistant for humans reflecting on these profound questions, organizing information, testing arguments, but it's not going to provide the answers or possess existential insight itself.
A powerful assistant, but not the oracle. Lastly then, as we move forward using AI for exploration, what's key for doing it ethically and responsibly?
The issue of bias in AI is absolutely critical. Bias can creep in at every stage. The data collected to train the AI, reflecting historical societal biases, how that data is labeled, the algorithms themselves, and how the AI is deployed. This can lead to AI systems amplifying existing societal biases, leading to unfairness, discrimination, or the spread of misinformation. Confirmation bias can also be baked in or exacerbated by AI.
And then consequences can be severe.
Absolutely. Unfair loan applications, biased hiring algorithms, discriminatory policing tools, misinformation campaigns. The potential for harm is significant. That's why developing and implementing robust ethical frameworks is paramount. These frameworks emphasize principles like fairness, accountability, transparency, explainability, privacy, security, and meaningful human oversight.
So we need rules for the AI.
We need rules, standards, ongoing auditing, and critically, we as users need to maintain awareness of AI's limitations and potential biases. We need to use AI critically as a tool to augment our own judgment and curiosity, not to replace it wholesale. Responsible exploration with AI requires ongoing vigilance and ethical reflection.
It really sounds like as we embrace AI's power to explore, we need to be just as curious, just as critical about the tool itself and its potential impacts.
Absolutely. Our drive to explore needs to be coupled with wisdom and responsibility, now more than ever.
Okay, so let's try to wrap up this deep dive. We've journeyed through a lot today. We've seen that curiosity is this incredibly fundamental, multifaceted human drive. It's got deep roots in our biology, our evolution, our history. It has these really wide-ranging impacts, boosting our learning, shaping our well-being, driving personal growth, empowering societal progress, though not without ethical complexities and potential downsides.
Right. It's a powerful force, for good and sometimes otherwise.
And now artificial intelligence is entering the picture in a big way. It offers these powerful new dimensions for exploration, understanding, and even creativity. But it also brings significant challenges and ethical considerations we need to navigate carefully. Hopefully this whole discussion has given you listening a richer, maybe more nuanced understanding of your own innate curiosity that drive you feel and the various forces that shape it and are shaped by it.
And maybe just one final thought to leave you with. As we increasingly partner with AI, rely on it to help us explore, process information, understand the world, it brings up a really crucial question, doesn't it? How do we ensure that our own human capacity for wonder, for deep questioning, for critical inquiry, how do we make sure that remains not just intact, but maybe even amplified in this new era?
Mhm.
What responsibility do we have individually and collectively to consciously cultivate and direct our curiosity in ethical, meaningful ways within this rapidly evolving technological landscape? That's definitely something worth pondering as you continue your own explorations.
This is DigitView.